Thank you for joining us at our webinar today on maximizing cloud efficiency and driving faster innovation with FinOps. My name is Sashena Hassamal, and I'm your host for today from Common Sense Conferences. We are delighted to have you join us. We've gathered a team of experts from AWS and IBM Apptio to help you understand how the right tools and frameworks can bridge the gap between finance and cloud operations. The aim is to enable you to focus on revenue generation, fostering innovation, and maximizing value for sustainable growth. We'll begin today's sessions with an introduction and presentation from the AWS team. We have Sid Jolapara with us, who is a FinOps and Cloud Financial Management APJ lead, which will then be followed by a presentation from the Apptio team, and we have Edward Chung, Solutions Consultant, with us. During their sessions, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A segment. We'll make sure to address them at the end of the sessions. Without any further ado, I now would like to hand over to Sid, who will be discussing the business value of the cloud and how you can get the most of your cloud investment. Sid, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So just a quick introduction. My name is Sid Jolapara. I look after cloud financial management, cloud finance strategy, and customer finance strategy here at AWS, and look after the APJ region. So today, got a really interesting topic. So going to take you through rethinking the business value of cloud. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, perfect. So I wanted to just start with giving a strategic vision of how I think about cloud spend, how it all fits in together, and essentially kind of the story that we're trying to tell with this. So if you think right at the top, the strategic vision for our customers and what I'm thinking we would like to get out of our cloud spend, etc., is for customers to be fully able to understand and explain their cloud expenditure, the value add, and then ensure that it drives value realization. Now, if we go through that, we obviously want to deliver citizen value, organizational value, technology value, etc., to get to that key cloud financial management or FinOps piece. What we don't talk about as much is those key enablers. And I've pulled those enablers after speaking to a lot of different customers. And what I've seen works well and what hasn't worked well for them. And has what's led to a successful cloud financial management journey or successful FinOps journey, and where we've had a challenge. So the first is executive sponsorship. Customers who've done FinOps well, they tend to have exec sponsorship. The CIO, CTO, CFO, etc., are obsessive about cloud spend, are actually driving this and saying, hey, you really need to focus in on this. And you know the old saying, what gets measured gets managed. That's exactly the same space here. If there is no exec sponsorship, it appears like it just doesn't, no one cares about it. The developers don't care, the app owners don't care, and therefore that doesn't succeed. The next space is having finance actively engaged in these sort of conversations. So finance actually understanding what cloud means, what does SaaS mean, what are they, when usage goes up, spend goes up, etc. So they're able to budget for it effectively and actually help you is critical. The next piece is resources. Having not dedicated headcount, it really depends on the size of the spend, but having resources that can actually do this full-time, look at it, or even part-time, sorry, but actually look at it, give it the gravitas that it actually requires. That's probably the biggest thing I've seen, where customers, when they have a person who's not fully dedicated to it or is not accountable for this, no one tends to really care about it. There's no accountability, there's no ownership, and it doesn't actually proceed from there. The next one is tools and processes, etc. So we obviously have with Apptio, Cloudability is a tool that we're talking about today, but having these processes and tools in place to actually help you understand and manage your spend is key. And the last two, cost-aware culture and understanding of, I'm talking about AWS obviously, but it could just be cloud cost and usage drivers, is around building that culture of, hey, if I just spin up something, my spend goes up. If I build it more efficiently, spend will go down. it's fascinating actually sitting down with some customers and realizing that that's not well understood, and people are still in that mindset of, I'm just going to launch stuff and I'll leave my test environments running because that's what I used to do in the past. I'll just do that in the future. So having that sort of mindset and that culture of understanding how cloud spend works and cost and value culture actually being built will drive a lot of robust and mature cloud financial management and FinOps. So once you have those enablers, you build your foundation. Once you've got the foundation, then you build up from there. If we go to the next slide now, please. What I wanted to show you is, from an AWS perspective, what are the 4 pillars of cloud financial management? This really aligns very closely with the FinOps framework. This is what we have at AWS, but it's pretty much all very similar. So there's 4 pillars: C, save, plan, and run, or measurement and accountability, cost op, planning and forecasting, and cloud financial operations. Now, with measurement and accountability, or C, it's interesting, right? When you talk to customers and you see what they're doing, everyone tends to focus in on cost optimization first. But you can't optimize your cost unless you know where you're spending. You can't clean dirty data unless you know where that dirty data is. So getting your measurement and accountability, your C, right, is key. Where am I spending my cloud spend? Who's using what? What's my budget? What's my forecast in terms of, am I over or under? What are my KPIs, etc.? Once you're able to see that, then you can do something about it, which is that optimization piece. So optimization here is looking at that spend from what we've built in that reporting in that C pillar. And it's, okay, can we right size? Can we refactor? Can we buy savings plans or reserved instances, etc., like commitments essentially. So we actually optimize that spend down, and we've got a really robust and efficient cloud spend piece there. And then you start looking forward. How can I plan and forecast this spend that I've got, this ideally optimized spend that I've got? Where's it going? Who's using what? How do I build up their budget? How do I build up their forecast? How robust is their forecast? Do engineers actually understand how to estimate their workload? So when they're launching a workload, they know how much it's going to cost. All those sort of things fall under that plan pillar. And then you've got cloud financial operations, which, to be honest, goes around all of this, which is the governance piece, the tools, the processes, the frameworks, etc., fall under that governance piece. So you've got the C, save, plan, and run. And what's interesting, when you talk to a lot of customers, they do optimization well. There's tools like Cloudability. We've got tools here at AWS. And to be honest, a lot of customers are able to understand, okay, if I turn stuff off, or my non-prod, if I adjust it a bit, my spend goes down. They're able to see that. Where they really, really struggle is in that C pillar and that plan pillar. It's just not something that they tend to focus in on. So what you tend to see is a workload go live, but it was unforecasted. It may be efficient and it may be optimized, but because it was not budgeted, the whole spend is over budget. So actually working in tandem is going to be key. And the last thing I wanted to talk about on this slide is when I've seen customers focus just on optimization at the pain of the others, if I put it that way. And it's actually a really interesting graph that tends to come up, where you see the spend go up, and then there's a freak out moment, and then they optimize. And then 6 months later, the spend goes back up because there's no governance, controls, reporting, forecasting, etc. in place. So it goes back up, and then you see, again, huge optimization, and then it just goes back up. It's almost like a heartbeat graph being created. Whereas customers that have the right culture, going back to that previous slide, the culture in place, the understanding of usage and drivers, and have the right robust enablers in place, the spend doesn't do this crazy seismic graph. It just tends to go up over time or tends to stay flat over time, whatever matching the organization's use over time. And it actually makes it easier to forecast and predict and stuff like that. So really important to actually think about all the pillars, not just optimization, because that way you're actually going to reduce and make your overall cloud spend much more efficient and therefore get that business value. Now, going on to the next slide, essentially what we're seeing here is optimization pillars. Now, some are easy to do, some take some time, some have high dollar value, some have lower, just depending on what the size of the prize is. But I really like this graph because it really just tells our teams where to focus. So commitments, for example, on the top left there, the reserved instances and savings plans, really good cost savings impact and little to no technical complexity. It's a contractual agreement with your cloud provider to say, hey, I'm going to commit to this level of spend based on whatever the spend is. And therefore, I would like a discount. With AWS, it's 1 or 3 years, and there's different types of commitment plans. But you've got that there. And then you've got, as you get more technically complex, you've got modernization that you can do, or efficiency, or really technically complex, but great cost savings impact is that cost aware architecture. So the way I like to think about this, and strategically for your organization, the way I'd recommend to think about this is how do you do those high impact, low technical complexity stuff first? So the low hanging fruit, we'd call it. Do that first. Use those savings to reinvest into serverless or Spot or those cost aware architecture type conversations, which tend to require reinvestment and upfront investment. So how do you use your savings to factor, redeploy, etc., and modernize? So then it delivers more savings, and then you can actually just continue that approach. So a great way to think about it. It doesn't have to be all at once, which I tend to see a lot of customers do. You can actually just do them piecemeal and see how you go. So use savings to fund work, which then delivers more savings, and then you have that flywheel in effect. Going on to the next slide. I am obsessed with something called shift left. And this is a slide that goes into a bit of detail, but it really talks to what shift left means and then therefore the impact of instance choice. So shift left is essentially how do you get your engineers to design the workload efficiently so that when it goes live into production, it's efficient already. So for example, on the left there, in this example, you've got a Windows 4-core 8 gig RAM machine, right? A standard machine, standard virtual machine. On the left there, if it's designed on C6i, which is one of our workload designs, one of our instance types, when you just launch it on demand, you're paying $3,200 for the period that we did this for, let's say per month. Then actually you decide, you know what, I don't need 4 cores. I'm going to right size it to 2 cores. So you go from 4 CPU cores to 2. And then you decide, you know what, the C6i was too large. I'm going to go to an M5. But you're still on demand. That spend drops to $1,700 per month, for example. And then you decide, you know what, actually this workload type is a burstable workload. So it should not be on the M series, it should be on the T series. So you move to a T3 and the spend becomes $1,000. And then you commit to a 3 all up front. At the bottom, you can see in that middle one, it now costs $542. And then you decide to modernize the last one there to a T4G. So the Graviton instance, which is our instances, and you're at $242 with a commitment there. So moving, like actually thinking about the way that the workload is architected while you're actually designing the workload out has a dramatic impact on how these instances actually cost. if you just signed up for the C6I, the $3,200 instance, and then launched the workload, and then bought a savings plan, yeah, you might buy a commitment. Sorry, yes, you might save a lot, but maybe it should never have been on the C6. It should have been on a T4, for example. So actually understanding the AWS or your cloud providers' offerings and making sure you actually design for the right offering type. So using the right instance, using the right architecture for the type of workload that you have will actually drive significant savings. And it's something that I don't see a lot of people talk about. They tend to talk about, I should turn off stuff on weekends, which obviously you should, and non-prod I'll turn off overnight and all that. Yep. But is the workload on the right instance type? Is it actually using the right piece? Is critical, and it's something that can actually deliver significant savings. So again, if we thinking about that previous slide where we use savings to do modernization, you could actually use the savings of a savings plan or a commitment to move from that C6I to a T4G, for example, and use those commitments to go, do you know what? I didn't need that machine type. I needed this machine type, and actually go from there. So this slide's really powerful to actually understand that impact and go from there. If we go to the next slide, I think that should be it from me. You've got my details there, so please feel free to reach out and we can have a chat. Happy to connect on LinkedIn and deep dive further with yourselves on how AWS can help on that journey. And now I'll pass over to Ed. So Ed, all over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sid, for that. And I think it's always interesting to hear about that shift left, because that's sort of happening across the FinOps org, right? People are starting to think about costings at the start of the journey as opposed to something that they do reactively. So hi, guys. My name is Ed. I am a solution consultant from Apptio, an IBM company. And in my day-to-day, what I get to do is talk to our customers about their cloud cost challenges and really help them to accelerate through tooling their journey in that FinOps space. So as Sid mentioned, there's sort of people, there's processes, and there's a tooling side to help with the FinOps adoption. What I'm hoping to share with you guys today is really how tooling can play a little bit of a part in reducing that cloud bill. So what do we see across all our customers who are in the cloud? There's a couple of key themes that will not come as a surprise to most people on this call. But overall, we know that there's being more and more investment into services such as cloud. So globally, we know that the cost of cloud is increasing. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. We know that we should be moving to better architectures and especially adopting these technologies such as cloud. And we'll talk to how we can prove that an organization is making the right decision by investing more in cloud. One thing that's really come up in the last 2 or 3 years that has complicated the picture is the adoption of AI and machine learning. And this is almost cloud accelerated in the sense that if we didn't have control of our cloud costs before, when we start to think of AI and machine learning models being used by an organization, if we don't have an understanding of what our costs are at the moment, that is going to increase exponentially as we start to adopt more technologies. And the last trend is one that is being pretty common throughout all of cloud's history, and that's that around 30% of expenditure on cloud does unfortunately go to waste, in the sense that it's being used on maybe dev-related instances that don't necessarily need to be on 24/7, or by not taking advantages of the scalable nature of cloud, doing a very static lift and shift movement to cloud. So how do we start to combat all of this stuff? Well, across the industry, FinOps is probably the easiest and most unified way to think of how we can deal with this. So AWS obviously has a framework that they like to follow, but there's also a more general one that is sort of cloud agnostic, where what we're trying to get organizations to understand is that they need to first be able to inform their organization of their cloud spend, then start to look at things like optimization, and then finally move into that stage of operate, where we're starting to embed this sort of thinking into everything that we do as an organization. And what I think is really interesting is it was Bill Gates who first introduced the idea that security in technology should be everyone's responsibility. And I think in a very similar way, FinOps is starting to adopt that mindset as well, that anyone who is in an organization, whether they are directly related to the cloud or they're serviced by the cloud, they need to start thinking about the cost impact of their operations or their footprints. Now, in saying that, not everyone can be involved with this FinOps initiative if we don't have a way to show them the information that they need. So the biggest challenge that we see is that it's really hard to quickly democratize cloud-related costings and information. And if you are able to do that, what you can do very quickly is start to build trust in the organization that our cloud environment is healthy and that we should be adopting more cloud in the way that we run our business. So this is the framework that we often evangelize and talk about with our customers and our clients. But what we also need to understand is that FinOps needs to happen in waves. It's really hard to start to tackle the entire challenge from the get-go by trying to adopt the best methodologies. We need to approach this in a very concentrated effort where we're continuously increasing our maturity. And that's where FinOps has sort of talked about this crawl, walk, run mentality. So walking through it, when we talk about that crawl section of FinOps, it's really about building the foundations, having some sort of structure in place to enable us to start to understand our cloud costs a little bit better. When we get down to a couple of more strategic level bullet points, this is talking about, do we have good tagging in place? Are we starting to look at a couple of those right-sizing opportunities or those low-hanging fruits, as Sid mentioned? Can we quickly see some of those anomalies when things really start to spike? And can we get ahead of them before we start to see an increase in spend? Once we've started to bring people into the fold and they can start to surface this sort of information, we move on to really where the most business value can come from adopting FinOps. And this is where we're starting to align FinOps to what the business is actually trying to achieve. So this is where we start to think about a concept such as unit economics, bringing in additional information that tells me, is my cloud actually delivering what it has set out to deliver? And then another really important way that we align our cloud and our FinOps to that business outcome is to start to mature how we're budgeting and how we're forecasting cloud. This again leads back to what Sid was saying about shifting left, getting organizations to start and budget things from the get-go. And I think it's a very interesting point that when we were looking at our poll earlier, that a lot of organizations are struggling with this sort of level of FinOps. We had a lot of respondents say that there is some level of budgeting and we're not sure if we'll go over and under. And also a couple of brave people were able to say that we don't necessarily have the control of our cloud costs and we might have already overspent for the year. So quite interesting trends, but rest assured you're not alone in that challenge. And then finally, if we really want to get to that run stage of FinOps, so that high level of maturity, this allows us to get all the business outcomes that cloud and especially AI are starting to advertise and talk about. If we can establish a really high level of FinOps maturity, we can be confident that as we're doing more AI POCs, as we're moving more workloads into the cloud and we're adopting these technologies, that there's a level of automation that's there where we know that our environment is always going to be safe and updated without experiencing high levels of costings. And more importantly, what we can report back to the organization is really the ROI of our cloud and our AI initiatives. So the question might then become, how do we actually enable this through FinOps tooling? And here at Aptio IBM, we actually have 3 levels of tooling that help organizations at the different levels of maturity that they might be at. So we've aligned our offering in the market to really meet the essentials crawl use cases, the standard to the walk use cases, and then premium to the run. And I won't go over this in too much depth, but I'll touch briefly on how the platform enables this at the different levels. So if you're looking to build a very foundational FinOps initiative, the biggest value that we get from something like a Cloudability Essential product is that straight away we can get that multi-cloud visibility. You might be predominantly in AWS, but if you have some other clouds, or if you're using some third-party tools such as database services or monitoring insights, very quickly, a unified tool allows you to bring in all of this spend data together and share it with the organization. We can also very quickly build some out-of-the-box dashboards that start to show you the insights that our organizations have been using to look and understand their cloud costs at for a very long period of time. Once you're ready to move into that business alignment level, this is where that Cloudability Standard offering is really helpful. So you can see here that this is our tool that especially helps with our forecasting and our budgeting. What this allows organizations to do, and we've actually done this with a local customer in Australia who works in the resource sector, is to really map down every single dollar that they want to spend in the following year in the cloud, align that to the different projects, when the projects come online, and when they roll off from a project stage to a BAU stage. And then as the dollars start to flow in throughout the year, understand how well we forecasted from the get-go. So you can see here that we're tracking the forecast against the actual numbers. And then as the year goes on, this is sort of that waterfall or that bridge that shows us where we've landed on our cloud costs from the start against our actuals. And then finally, for those organizations that are at a level where they have that basic and standard level of FinOps enabled, they might start to look at things like automation of their cloud or reporting of ROI of their cloud. And this is where things get especially tricky, because as much as organizations want to talk about optimizing and automating their cloud, a lot of the times there is still a lot of buy-in that needs to happen from the business to enable someone to do this automatically. So we start to talk about automation in the sense that we can help show the recommendations, but then also action them as they start to make sense. How do we start to make that make sense to the business? We have to build the trust. So showing different dashboards where we can have a very good view of our entire cloud environment and how the different pieces link to each other to the executives really helps to build that trust there, but then allow you to start to automate some of these processes. So hopefully we've been able to look at the FinOps challenge and how we can tackle it and accelerate that with something like the Cloudability product line. Where we would recommend going from here is to either start to do some more work around evangelizing this in the organization, or we do have sort of AWS cost management immersion days as well, where we start to look at the tool at a much lower level, start to look at the insights that we can drive with AWS and Cloudability working together. So it really does depend on where your organization is at with the FinOps conversation. In saying that, we also are able to reach out if you would like to speak with ourselves or anyone in region. We can request a demo where we sit down and understand your exact pain points around the cloud and what use cases you'd want to tackle. and we can run a very scheduled demo there. But with that, that concludes sort of that section on how tooling can help to accelerate that FinOps adoption. And I'll hand back to, I think, a couple of Q&A sessions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Edward. That was a great presentation. I now want to move on to the Q&A segment. So if any of you have questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A box and we'll get to it. But as we wait for these, maybe Edward, I have a question and I'd love to know how you connect your cloud providers to bring in costing data. Maybe you could help us address this.
Yeah, so when it comes to bringing data into the platform, it is quite easy and straightforward. So for example, with AWS, we're taking the live data that comes out of the AWS environment. It's the simple act of using the cost and usage reports that you would get through AWS. We would then create just that IAM access role that gives us the ability to ping AWS every hour. And whenever the costing report is there, that will start to flow into the platform. A similar process is sort of followed for the other cloud providers as well. But what that enables us to do is to have almost real-time information in the platform, allowing people to catch cost overspend as soon as it starts to happen. So thank you for that question.
I was just going to add to that. Getting that real-time information is so key because with cloud, every minute, every hour matters, right? So like getting that up-to-date information, and it goes back to that pillars I was talking about, getting that C pillar right. The quicker you're able to see a challenge, the quicker you're able to see an opportunity. Even you can act on it much faster instead of waiting a month or so for that thing to come up.
Great, thank you so much. I also had potentially another question. If you could maybe highlight some good business metrics to explore during the walk phase of FinOps. If you had, perhaps Edward, you could help us with that.
Yeah, so I know I did speak very briefly about the business metrics that we would like to generate through the cloud. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a way to tell the story that just an increase in cloud costs is not necessarily a bad thing. If we're able to service more customers, even though our cloud bill is going up, this is actually a really good thing. So the graph that we're trying to draw is not just looking at our cloud bill going like this, but that maybe it actually is quite stable when we consider that we might be servicing more customers. So that's a really good metric to start to bring in cost per customer. We've seen organizations bring in things like costs per transaction as well, but this doesn't necessarily just have to apply to businesses. If there are non-for-profit organizations or government departments, we can start to get very customized with what metric we're bringing in. So we're talking about maybe number of patients that we might have served for a health organization. Sid, I know you deal with a lot of organizations where you're starting to look at unit economics. What would be some other examples that you're aware of?
Yeah, so technical ones like that graph, the one I'd really like to do, it's more technical than it is business, but connects back to it, is cost per gig, right? Because over time, storage is going to keep going up because you are generating more data, creating more things, outputs, etc. So the amount you're storing is going up, therefore total storage cost may be going up. But if you're using archiving solutions and stuff like that, your cost per gig might actually be going down. So you've got that cost graph happening. So that's a really simple one that you guys can definitely have a look at. And from a business perspective, cost per bed, cost per patient, cost per store, if you're a retailer, those sort of things are really interesting to actually look at because, again, going back to Ed's point earlier, cloud is a mirror of the organization. So if the organization is growing, your cloud spend may be growing, but that unit economics view will actually tell you, do you know what? I'm actually being more efficient. Yes, my cloud spend may be going up over time, but my cost per store is going down. So as I open more stores, my cost per store is down, or cost per product, or etc. So yeah, really I think, a very, very powerful way to tell the story of what's actually happening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Actually, we have a couple of questions that have come through. So I will start with the first one, which is, how do we balance performance, security, and cost efficiency in a multi-cloud environment?
I'm able to touch on that very quickly, and Ed, I'll hand over to you as well. But it's probably one of the key questions that I see a lot of customers face, where particularly in that shift left approach, when you're architecting, performance and security tend to be upfront, and security, as you'd always expect, to be the most or one of the most important things. So bringing that cost efficiency space in as well to go, okay, how do we balance the triumvirate of those three is key. And it really, for me, it depends on the culture of the organization. Is cost an important piece of the pie? And will the organization actually say, do you know what? This application is hitting our performance targets and it's as secure as can be. But as we optimize it, this is the cost. And do you know what? We can't launch this workload the way it is. We need to architect it. Does the organization have that sort of culture to say, we're not going to launch? How do we rethink it and go back to the drawing board and going to the, like, how do we architect it to the right instance type that I was touching on before is critical. I know I'm not answering that multi-cloud piece yet, but that's probably, I see it as much an organizational cultural problem as I see it as a technical problem. And from a multi-cloud perspective, I think Ed, I'll hand over to you because I think you've got more of that view than I do. I might be throwing you in the deep end, but yeah.
No. All those points are important, and the culture part is so integral. The other piece is that storytelling. Can you tell the right story with the information that you have to make the organization trust that, yes, this application will still experience good performance if we decide to size it down. So that's where leveraging a tool like Cloudability would really help, because you can bring all that information in. There's the reports there that support and make your story defensible when you go to an executive audience or when you go to the engineering team to say, look, we know that this is going to be okay from a security and a performance-based perspective if we decide to make this cost savings opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we have time for one last question, and I will go to the second one that was asked, which is, what are the key challenges organizations face when scaling FinOps practices?
Sorry, you go ahead. Yeah, you go.
I was just going to say that when you do have to scale, it really is, how do you get people interested and on board with it? So I think what really helps is, if anyone wants to be able to see the information, give them access to it. Even if it's the finance administrator who is only responsible for a tiny piece of the cloud spend, give them access to the spend that they're interested in and have them organically start to explore and understand their cloud costs. So that's again where a platform like Aptio will allow them to do that, because now the information lives somewhere separate from just the AWS console.
Yeah. I think I'd just connect to that as well, where, like, don't keep this data secret, publish it, keep it open. It goes back to the enablers I had on that slide. Executive sponsorship to allow it to grow, etc. But yeah, the key point is, don't withhold that information. Everyone, the more you can actually show people this and say, hey, the impact of your decisions are this, then you're able to actually drive that culture. And once you drive that culture, you're then able to scale, because it's more about scaling the culture than it is about just scaling tools or reports and stuff like that.
Awesome. Great. Well, I'd like to stay on time. So with that, I'd really like to thank all of you for today's session. It was really interesting, and I hope our attendees had some great insights. Thank you all for joining today. And if you have any further questions, we can help connect you to both the Apptio and AWS teams. We look forward to hosting you at our events in the future. Thank you so much and have a great day. Take care. Goodbye.